Menopause is the last wellbeing taboo. Those are the words of today's guest, who has become the voice for women's support at work. Companies, in particular their HR departments and associated wellbeing advocates, need health and wellbeing support and education for their female team members. Sharon MacArthur, founder of Miss Menopause and workplace educator for women's health and wellbeing at work, explains how only an embarrassingly tiny percentage of companies are really giving menopause wellbeing support any proper attention. Many UK companies mistakenly believe they are, but they really just aren't. What's more, women are working for longer, which means proportionately there are and will be more women in the workplace during menopause. So we should be tackling this issue with urgency. In this episode, we touch upon everything from how we can do more to educate our company staff to become aware of this health issue, all women in their lives face it, and other unspoken implications when coming of menopause age, including mental health. I'm really excited and honoured to talk with Sharon today. Welcome, Sharon. Welcome to Unpause the Menopause. How are you today?
I'm fabulous, so thanks for having me.
Oh, it's really lovely to meet you in person. I've been following you for ages. So I'm really looking forward to our chat today. I think it's going to be lots of fun. We start off each week with this kind of icebreaker question where we talk about how our morning routines and what we do to set ourselves up for the day, to see if we've got any tips for our listeners on how you perhaps set up your day so you have a really positive or healthy or happy day.
You don't want my tips because I get up really early with my other half, feed cats, help put my other half's food up for him to take to work. And then if I possibly can, I go back to bed. That's what I do. So back to sleep. If I've got to do a bit of work, I like to snuggle down, and then I might even have what I like to describe as a nana nap. So if I try not to get up before 9 o'clock, if I can possibly help it. So there you go. More sleep. That's the way forward for me.
Awesome. I love it. So what time do you get up earlier? Do you get up at 7 and then go back to bed at 9?
It's about 10 past 6. 10 past 6, I do get up. But hopefully by about 6:45, I'm back in bed because all the routine's done. And then I'll start my day anytime from 9 o'clock onwards. But yes, having snuggled back down.
Brilliant. So Sharon, you have become an absolute menopause advocate. You're dealing with a lot of women in the workplace. What was the moment that made you realise that this was your calling?
Well, I didn't know it was my calling at all. And if you'd said to me 5 years ago, Sharon, you're going to get passionately involved with the menopause, I would have said, don't be ridiculous. That's got nothing to do with me in my life at all. So I was running another successful business, which still exists. I'm the woman of the crazy business name, Red Handbag. So a leadership confidence coach for women in business. That was all going very well. And then at the age of 47, 48, I started to have some really strange things happen to me. Could no longer sleep, night terrors, waking up hot in the night, really exhausted. And all I can say to you is that one of my good friends dared to say to me, Sharon, do you not think you could be menopausal? And I have to tell you, I was outraged. I was like, how dare you say that to me? I'm far too young. So in my utter ignorance, now I had been a senior leader in a FTSE 100 company. So I used to think I was really smart, I was streetwise, and I knew a lot of things about a lot of things. I didn't have a clue about menopause, and I truly believed, as a non-parent, I knew at a very young age I wasn't cut out to be a mother. It was my body, my choice. So I utterly believed, because I hadn't shaken up my hormones through pregnancy, whatever that menopause thing was, it was not going to be happening to me, because I was so ill-informed. Well, I just wasn't informed at all. So like I say, when somebody said, Sharon, do you not think this strange stuff could be menopausal? I was like, don't be ridiculous. And then I suddenly thought, well, what is it then? What is it if it's not that? So I started to do lots of research, and slowly was horrified and came around to the idea that it probably was this menopause thing. And there was a couple of catalysts that really led me to believe, to do this service. And when I set up, like I say, it's going to be 5 years in January, nobody wanted to talk to me about menopause in the workplace. In fact, some thought I was a bit bizarre, really. But I said, maybe, just maybe, I'm a genius. So I'm liking to believe on this fine afternoon that perhaps I am indeed a genius.
Just ahead of the curve.
And I was discouraged initially by a couple of quite women, well, a couple of women who I really looked up to were a bit of a mentor to me. One of them said, well, why would anybody want to do that in the workplace? That's what relevance has that got? So despite the naysayers, me being me, I ploughed on regardless. And certainly for the first 12 to 18 months, nobody really was that interested in talking to me about this stuff. So I was kind of talking into a void. And now, brilliant news in the last certainly 12, 24 months. I think a lot of celebrities have come involved, and that's been helpful as well. Traction is, pace is picking up and traction is growing. But we've still got a long way to go. But it's just about making this business as usual for me, and really simplifying all of this stuff out there. Not making it scary, not making it fearful, and not making it complicated. And that's what really I do through Miss Menopause. My mission, as I say, is to make menopause in the workplace business as usual for everyone.
It's interesting you say that. I think I've not got a dissimilar experience to yours about it. I started sort of looking into it 3 years ago, not 5 years ago. And again, nobody was talking about it then. And we have to be thankful to the celebrities who have brought it to the forefront, definitely. But even amongst our friendship groups, we weren't chatting about it as women to each other. It wasn't, you still kind of sort of kept, well, my friendship group anyway, you still kind of kept it quiet. Whereas now we all feel liberated to talk about it. Actually, sometimes if we're having a coffee or a glass of wine or whatever, somebody goes, can we just stop talking about this now and talk about something else for a while? Because everyone has got that freedom now to talk about it.
So yeah, so I say menopause could have killed me because I fell asleep at the wheel of my car when I was driving at speed. And that's part of my main story, because I could no longer remain asleep. But my philosophy on this is about, and I say this and I say it can sound quite brutal, but somebody once told me that no human gets out alive and that nobody ages more well. So, when I ask most women, what are you doing to manage their menopause? Guess what most of them say? Well, nothing is what most of them say. So I'm saying, can we stop wearing this badge of nothing, like a badge of honour, and realise that if nobody ages more well, would you not want to maintain and retain the quality of your life for as long as possible? Because why would you not want to do that? And I talk all the time and say, I'm 54 years of age now. At the age of 54, I believe I have more behind me than ahead of me. So why would I not want to have the best quality of life for as long as possible? And that's the message that I'm sending out there into the world, but through the workplace space. And some, the best feedback I get is when I spoke to a woman who said, I'm just getting on with it, I'm just doing nothing. And then a couple of weeks later, I get a fabulous email to say, look, you kind of gave me the verbal kick up the backside to go, yeah, there are lots of things I could be doing and I've chosen not to. And now I've gone off and done this, this and this. And that's really what it's all about, is knowing that you don't have to become what I describe as a victim of the menopause, because it truly is the gift that keeps on giving. So my message is, let's not let it do that.
Sharon, I cannot actually believe how much our philosophies are aligned. I am exactly with you on that. I just think it's a stage of life that you just want to crack on with. You can live so well and be so happy. And there's so much sort of chat in the media at the moment about how awful it is. But actually, if you manage it and you do certain things that help you along, and don't get me wrong, there's some awful stories out there. And, yours could have been a horrendous story as well, falling asleep at the wheel. And we've all of us who've been through perimenopause realize that there are terrible symptoms out there, but actually you can take steps to crack on and keep going. You talk about menopause being the last taboo, and I presume that's probably to do with the workplace. Why do you think that is?
It's really difficult to try and understand. I think it's like a storm, a perfect storm almost, because pensionable age have been extended. So at the age of now 54, I was led to believe until fairly recently I could retire at 60. Now, pensionable ages were extended around 2010. So what that means, if somebody of my age of 54, my pensionable age has jumped from 60 to 67. And I say this all the time, and guess what's set to happen if you're a younger woman out there in the workplace right now? Well, really, it's going to affect everybody, but when we talk about menopause, so the trend is only going one way, and that's up. So you've got women having to work full-time longer than ever before. So you've got more women aging into the workplace, and that trend's going to continue. And then, of course, we've got other initiatives like, AD&I initiatives, so equality, diversity. We've got wellbeing initiatives. And for some unknown reason, and I'm not clever enough to know this, menopause has just been completely excluded from all of those things up until fairly recently. So if you think about it, mental health and wellbeing, look how much investment, quite rightly so, has been sent out into the world, and especially more so than through the pandemic, and exactly when people needed that. But I always say that I hope and I wish that the smallest percentage in any workforce would suffer from, let's call it, mental ill health. For the very, very first time in a woman's life, who might never have described herself as mentally different, mentally changed, mentally unwell, the saddest thing and the most common thing women believe when I meet them is they think they have early onset Alzheimer's. So what I'm saying is, if in your workplace you think you've got all of those things covered, mental health and well-being and equality and diversity, and menopause isn't part of it, then you've got a massive hole. And that's because everybody, in my opinion, is going to be impacted by menopause, whether that's directly or indirectly. And that's because, whether we like it or not, women are insidious. We're everywhere. There's literally no escape, is there? So we're currently making up 51% of the UK population, just saying. So we're either going to be colleagues, friends, family members, mothers, wives, girlfriends, partners, whatever. So what I'm saying is, and some of the most profound feedback I've had over the years now has been from men. It's been from men about this subject. So that's why my message is, this is a conversation for everybody. For everybody.
I was going to ask you actually about how you do educate people, because I'm interested in what you do in the workplace, whether you run different sessions for different age groups, for example, or whether you run different sessions for men and women, or if you just do it all together.
All together. So when I very first set out, I used to have a different philosophy for maybe managers versus non-managers. But because, and this sounds ridiculous, but in the 21st century, and you'll kind of know what I'm talking about, because this is such a new subject, which is, I find it outrageous that I say this. If we assume just about most people are starting from zero, then why would we have different stuff for different people? So my philosophy is, we're all learning about this equally at the same time. So let's all learn together about this stuff. And again, I would say it's pretty old school in the workplace now that you almost give managers a different experience to non-managers. I think that's wrong. I think everyone should get the same knowledge, same information, so we're all treated fairly, with that equality and as adults. And I say this all the time. So anybody can come to my sessions, whether they're managers, non-managers, male, female, other, it doesn't matter. They're all going to get the same knowledge, the same information. And that, for me, I think describes a really healthy culture in a workplace, because it means that you have that open and honest, ability to talk to anybody about anything. I say this all of the time. We should be able to say things like, hand, foot, vagina, penis in a sentence without going, whoa, and having an attack of the vapors. We've all got bodies. We've all got body parts. So can we just be adult about this, please? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I also think there's something, unifying is the wrong word, but it's something about bringing people together that, it doesn't matter if you're the senior management or the CEO, or you're coming in for once a week to help out with the telephones or something like that. Everyone goes through the same thing. It's not something that affects you just because of your position. And it's maybe quite good for everybody to talk about it and realize that if the CEO is in a bad mood that day, this might be why, and vice versa.
Totally. Well, cleaner, queen, it doesn't matter. Menopause, I always say to younger women especially, menopause is coming to a body near you at some point, whether you like it or not. It's not something you can avoid. So, I think some men think, this menopause thing, and I've said to a few men over the years, women aren't choosing this, by the way. We didn't say, oh, please, Mother Nature, can we have menopause today? So we don't get a choice. So, we just want to understand what's happening to our minds and bodies, to be educated enough to manage it and work through it and get out the other side. And surely, let's be honest, the world still tends to be run by white middle-aged men, is it not? So those men who most often will have wives, partners and girlfriends, it's not just a business issue, but it is a business issue at the same time. So when I've got men, probably some of the most profound feedback I've had has been from men. who've told me over the years that, Sharon, I wasn't keen to come along to your session. In fact, I thought, oh my goodness, what on earth is that going to be like? But when they've told me, it's probably been one of the best things that they've ever done, because left to their own devices, they know they would have not have sought that information out for themselves. But when they realise how, how transformational it can be, as in, oh my goodness, yes, that's going to affect my wife, my mother, my whoever. And when they're telling me this is probably going to help to save my marriage, that's when you've become an employer of choice. And more I'm working in much more male-dominated environments, where those organisations are waking up to the idea that, if you're working in manufacturing and some of your employees, mostly men, are operating things like heavy machinery and heavy equipment, and they're going home to wives, partners and girlfriends that could eventually, if not already, going through menopause, and they're arguing and they're sleep deprived and all of these things that are happening in homes hidden away from the workplace, they are starting to realise that educating everybody is a real bonus, and it makes them an employer of choice, where historically you'd have looked at that subject, wouldn't you, have gone, well, that's a woman's thing, that's for women of the world. And that's why I'm so proud to say the work that I do is absolutely inclusive, where I want everybody to come along. And I often describe myself as Miss Menopause as providing the corporate girl chat, but everybody's invited to come along and learn this stuff.
That's great. And do you think that you speak a lot on TV and radio shows and social media? Do you think there's enough awareness out there now, or do you think we still need to have more?
I think there's. I'm going to use this phrase, which I keep telling people off for using. I'm going to use it to make a point. What I would say is, it's women of a certain age, as in menopausal age, of probably, because we're living and working through this. We're very passionate about it. We absolutely are. But younger women still are looking at us and go, what's all the fuss about? That's got nothing to do with me. And men of the world are going, well, that's to do with women. So we've still got these big voids right now, as women are approaching and coming up to those menopausal age ranges, we're getting more interested. And then, of course, we're passionate about it when we're in it. But I think there's a lot more to do, pre and also even post, because I think a lot of women, again, I know men are rubbish as well, but a lot of women I've met over the years particularly are really bad at self-care. Really, really bad, because they're caring for everyone else. They're caring for younger families. They're caring for older parents. They're trying to hold down full-time jobs. They could be lone or single-parent families. And everyone's caring for everybody else, but they're not caring for themselves. And I still think there's more to be done about educating about. I say this all the time. Menopause, in my opinion, is to be managed, not to be endured. So you don't get a prize for endurance, for doing nothing. So, this whole thing about, whilst I'm saying, I believe menopausal women are like live living experiments. And that's just because what might work for me brilliantly might never ever work for you, and vice versa. So what I'm saying to women of the world is, some of you are going to have to work really hard. You're going to have to work really hard. You're going to have to do lots of things. And it might take months, it might even take years for you to find the right solution and combination of things to manage your menopause. My story is, it took me 18 months of trial and error to get to where I initially started to manage my menopause. But once you've managed your menopause, it might mean that you have to tweak and change your management of menopause for the rest of your life. Because again, I've got a bit of a problem with the term menopause, because pause to me indicates something could come back, couldn't it? It's paused. So I think we need a rebrand, don't you? Meno-stop. That's what I'm going for. We need a rebrand, Meno-stop. Because your fertility's not, well, I'm painting it that it's Meno-stop, because once your fertility's ended, it's not coming back. Do you know what I mean? It's not coming back. So you're menopausal now for the rest of your life. So what I'm saying to women is, stop doing nothing. Stop faffing about or saying, yeah, I tried that thing and it worked. And what's it doing now? Well, it's not really working. What are you doing? Nothing. I'm like, trying one thing once in your lifetime is not good enough if it's not good enough. So if the quality of your life is being impacted in a negative way, then do something about that. And what's brilliant is, every single human out there in the world can care for themselves if they wish.
Sorry, it's also, if you care for yourself, that then enables you to care for others. I think that's a key thing. That's a message that I think resonates with a lot of women, because we do tend to want to care for others. It's just part of our nature. But actually, you can't if you're empty. You can't if you're angry or if you're knackered. So you need to take steps to do that so that you can then look after everybody else. I think a lot of the symptoms that we talked about now and then are maybe more well known with men, like the hot flushes, the sweats, that kind of stuff that I think that are maybe becoming in the films or in the media generally. That's all cool and that's fine. And we need to recognize those symptoms. But I think for workplace symptoms, a lot of it is, my understanding is, and my experience was that it was about suddenly having anxiety when I would never have had anxiety before, a lack of confidence in my ability, again, which, well, a lot of women have a lack of confidence in their ability, but like a severe lack of confidence given the experience, and brain fog. For me, it was absolutely forgetting words, couldn't finish sentences, and the Alzheimer's thing that you touched on before. So it actually, so it may impact your home life slightly differently than it will impact your working life as well, and that's important to talk about. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Well, anxiety is the number one. So anxiety, brain fog. And when I talk about brain fog, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, it's the inability to remember simple words and phrases that you know that you know. And I feel awful because I used to laugh at my grandmother or my grandmothers who would call me a cat's name, the dog's name, my brother's name before they got to my name eventually. And I found myself doing that and I felt terrible. So, oh my goodness, I used to laugh, I know, at my grandmothers. But absolutely. So if you can imagine you're in the workplace and you're asked to, I don't know, present, or maybe you run things like the payroll, which, you know, without your expertise, people don't get paid accurately. And then you suddenly can't remember, you know, how to type something into your keyboard, or you can't remember a simple word or a phrase and you're standing up in front of an audience. How terrifying that might be. And so, in effect, what's happening is a lot of men are powering towards their retirement and perhaps looking to be, you know, get promotions. They're filling up their pension pots. They're getting more money into the system. Where women, I tend to find, are doing the opposite. They're cowering away in corners. They're terrified that somebody's going to notice that they're not feeling themselves. Because most women, let's be honest, they know they're not feeling 100%, but they're not connecting the dots. So they're coming into work, regardless of how they're feeling, but just hoping that nobody notices them or asks them to do something out of the ordinary because they're terrified and that you know, anxiety. So I see women reversing away from opportunities, which is really heartbreaking. It's part of the reason why I do what I do, because lots of women are going to take time out to have their families, quite rightly so, and it puts a dent in their career. And then they come back and then the last place they've got to get to is to retirement and, you know, and go off and then have a lovely life. And lots of women, we've heard these statistics being banded around for a little while now, you know, are walking away from opportunities, really, as I describe it, because of ignorance, because nobody's told us about the impact menopause can have on us, not just mentally, but physically, but both. And so, you know, most of us have only ever heard about these things called hot flushes, which sound really insignificant in themselves. And I remember thinking, oh, hot flushes. But nobody ever told me that I couldn't escape my own body. So there would have been several times in recent history where I would, you know, rip my top off to try and put my boobs against a cold window, which, let's be honest, in the workplace would not be appropriate, because that was the only thing that I'd ever heard of. But, you know, like you say, this brain fog, this inability to sleep, this anxiety, crippling anxiety. But the great news is, you know, and I talk a lot about my own story, is, yes, it took me 18 months. Yes, I say menopause could have killed me. But because I was determined to look after myself as well as I could, eventually, HRT worked for me, but it took me 18 months to get there. And the brilliant news is, for me, within 2 weeks of getting my HRT, all of my symptoms went. But in the last 4 years, certainly within 2 weeks. But remember, it took me 18 months to actually even get there. But some women, you know, they're going to find HRT and they're going to go, and they say, Sharon, but that didn't happen to me. I say, remember, what works for me might never work for you and vice versa. Remember, we are live, living experiments. If you could say all Sharons, you know, born in 1968 who have a problem with leopard print, i.e. I can't stop buying it, we're going to have a menopause like this and you could manage it like that, then the world would be amazing. But you can't. You absolutely can't. So anybody who loves a process Menopause is not one of them. You cannot process menopause because it can go on and upside down, and you think it's stopped, and then the symptoms come back, and it goes on and on and on. And like I say, I've met women, in their 60s, in their 70s, 80s, 90s, who are still telling me, because of the loss of those hormones that drove their fertility, because menopause, they're still having symptoms. So my message keeps, in the workplace is, please don't become a victim of the menopause. And, at the age of 54, menopause could have killed me. It took me 18 months. I faffed about for quite some time doing nothing, like a lot of women do. But I cannot, honestly say, hand on heart, that I feel as good as I ever did, if not better in some instances. That's because I'm looking after myself. So in the last 6 months, I've added in vaginal HRT, which a lot of women have never even heard of. We're starting to see it advertised on the press now in the UK. It's called Gina. I'm now added in testosterone. I now spray magnesium spray back all over. I'm now going weight training 4 times a week, as well as my transdermal HRT patches. So that's a lot of energy and effort. But you know what? Like the advert says, it's because I believe, it's because I'm worth it.
You're worth it. Yeah, exactly. And it's like we talk about this as well. You can't just do one thing and expect to feel better. It's a whole body thing that's happening to you. So you have to take this whole body approach. And it's interesting about the weight training. I was just chatting to somebody else about weight training. So important to start doing that now. You don't want to go and sweat your arse off on a treadmill anymore. You want to go and do some weight training and actually increase your muscle mass, increase your bone density. Yeah, exactly. Do all that kind of stuff. So as well as education in the workforce, do you think it should go further than that? Do you think employers should be paying for HRT? Do you think there should be a menopause leave policy? What's your view on that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm a little bit controversial in this space, let me tell you. So I won't name the company, but World Menopause Day last year, there was a big fanfare about a particular organisation that was going to pay for women's HRT. Now, on the surface, that sounded absolutely fantastic. However, I started getting women approaching me who worked in that organisation who were very, very unhappy. Because if they just thought it through, and rather than say, I'm going to pay for everyone's HRT, not everyone will be A, able to take it, or B, want to take it. So I'm going to swear, pissed off a lot of women, rather than being an inclusive thing. So if they'd said, we're going to give you a voucher to the cost of X, so you can spend on anything you want to do with managing your menopause, whether that's a gym pass or HRT or, buying vitamin D or whatever. But they didn't. They specifically drilled it down to one thing. So it actually made it really, really exclusive to only those women who could or wanted to take HRT. So no, I'm not a fan of that. I think everything that a company does needs to be chunky. Yeah, well, it was coming from a great place. I could absolutely see that. But my philosophy is make your processes in the business as big and wide and chunky and generic as possible. Because a lot of companies, and again, the government want companies potentially to go down the route of writing a policy for menopause. Now, I'm never going to say to any organisation I work with, don't have a policy. But the policy is only as good as the human that ever looks at it or reads it. And the difficulty is with policies and processes is you could end up with a cupboard full of them where nobody's got the time to read them. And my philosophy is menopause more or less important than any other health or well-being topic in your business? Well, I say, no, it isn't more important. What I say about menopause is what's different about it is the scale of it, because everyone will be impacted directly or indirectly. But what's to stop you, if you write a policy for menopause, what's to stop somebody coming and knocking on your door in 6 months' time and saying, hey, Sharon, where's the cancer at work policy? Where's the diabetes at work policy? So all I'm saying is there a danger that you could end up painting yourself into a corner by trying to legislate for everything? My message is, if you educate everybody, so everybody becomes an advocate of this, not specific. So again, I'm not a fan of having specific individuals who say, oh, we're a mental health advocate or we're a menopause advocate. Because now you've made that quite an exclusive set of behaviours, especially when companies are saying we want to be more inclusive. Because now if you've given individuals more information than the majority, then that's an exclusive set of behaviours. So what I'm saying is, it not better to let everybody have access to this stuff, so then everybody could learn about it? So, some companies in the early days would say this, horrible phrase, which I'm really not keen on. Oh, Sharon, we're going to get you to work with our women of a certain age. And I'm like, whilst that's got a place, we need to work with humans of every age, of every persuasion, to get the conversation going, because everybody is going to encounter this one way or another. So the more that we can keep pushing back and saying, rather than adding complexity by more policies, more processes, more procedures, I often say to companies out there, I know that each company out there will have, in the main, certainly from a certain size, not tiny businesses, but even then they'll have great processes. But imagine if you're about your process for the disclosure of pregnancy. So everyone will just about have a process for that. So what I'm saying to managers and leaders of the world is, rather than do what I call a management eye roll, where they're going to go, another thing you want me to think about now, what I'm saying is, think about what's similar, not what's different. So what's similar is, if I disclosed a pregnancy, what would you do? Well, you might give me a car parking space near the office because that's appropriate. It's a reasonable adjustment. You might give me equipment like a desk fan or a footrest. You might give me time off for appointments. What I'm saying is, everything that I've just named, you can dig into that toolkit and apply it to this subject of menopause. So we're not starting from scratch. We're not reinventing the wheel. There is no need to reinvent the wheel, because if you've embedded things like mental health and wellbeing processes, certainly in the last 2 years, they didn't exist, 3-4 years ago, did they? Most companies weren't even talking that way. So if you've introduced those into your business, this is just an addition. This isn't we've got to do all this extra work and write a policy and have these people. Simplicity is the key, in my opinion. So let's stop adding in more complexity, which could cost more money and put people off the subject. Let's get people to go, so it's like that. Oh, and it's like that. Oh, and I don't have to, right, now I get it. Now I want to talk to you.
Yeah, makes it much easier to implement. I was going to ask you what your sort of a big message was to HR departments or managers in the workplace, but actually that is it. That's the key message, isn't it? That you probably have a lot of similar policies and procedures in place already that you can just really, really easily tweak.
Yes, absolutely. And when I've said that to my clients, they kind of go, yeah, never really. And I think that's because a lot of noise out there where, we feel compelled sometimes, don't we, to go, well, they're doing it, so I better do that. And then we end up on this roller coaster of, we're all doing the same thing. I often say, stop a minute and think, what are you trying to achieve? What have you already got? What could you use rather than do more work? What could you do to do as little work as possible? Because the foundations are already there.
Yeah, that's perfect. I've really enjoyed this, Sharon. We tend to end our podcast each week with can you give our listeners a top tip? And I wonder today if it's maybe about, we've talked about managers and in the workplace, but I wonder if you're an employee and you want to go forward and maybe start talking about menopause, if it's not open at your workplace, how would you suggest that they do that?
First of all, if you're passionate about the subject, and especially if it's happening to you, to manage your own menopause as best that you can, but to talk about it, it's simplicity again. You might set up a WhatsApp group, mightn't you, which is getting people talking about the subject. You might want to go and invite some of those key senior influencers and tell them your story and what the impact's been for you, if you're feeling brave enough. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do, but I always say start small and keep it really, really simple. But the power of stories and the power of your story will be transformational to other people. So please feel that you can be brave enough to share it.
And sharing stories. And I think that what you've mentioned as well about the whole being able to use the existing policies and procedures in place in the workplace, I think that's a really good message to give to line managers or direct reports or whatever, that actually you might already have systems in place that can help me. We just need to veer them slightly off course and so they can help me this way with menopause. I have absolutely loved this, Sharon. I think I could probably talk to you for about another 5 hours. We've hardly touched on it. We might have to do another episode. But it's been super fun, and you bring so much energy to it. I bet you are amazing at your job. How can people find you online?
Well, I'm on most platforms, so missmenopause.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, Sharon MacArthur. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, so miss_menopause for both of those. So if you want to find me, you can. I've also got a Facebook group, which has got over 8,000 women in there. So again, if you don't mind a bit of swearing, a bit of fun along the way, then come and join into the Facebook group too.
That's amazing, Sharon. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.